So we are here to talk about the somewhat forgotten 1984 movie Dreamscape, starring Dennis Quaid. And this one is getting its Blu-ray debut on the 31st of July by Second Sight Entertainment. And it will be available from video on demand, Blu-ray and DVD from that date. So Dreamscape, this is one of those films that I remember seeing back in the day, and it's like a coin that falls out of your back pocket and disappears down the sofa and is kind of forgotten about until it resurfaces years later. I remember seeing this movie, and I'm sure many of you remember the Snake Man in this movie, and I hadn't thought about it until obviously it's now been kind of re-released so many years later. So the story here basically focuses on Dennis Quaid's character, who is a kind of psychic, and he's kind of wasting his talents gambling, etc. And he used to work with Max von Sydow's character, who was kind of a doctor, and he's now involved in a kind of experimental procedure to enter dreams. And this has actually been put together by a kind of shady government person played by Christopher Plummer. Anyway, they talk sort of Quaid into kind of joining this sort of program in hope of helping people having severe nightmares and things like that. However, Plummer's character has got kind of darker motives, and they will be revealed through the movie. And as we see through the film, there's kind of various kind of dream sequences involving different people, and of course the Snake Man, which we'll come on to again in just a second. So I've got to say, watching this film nowadays, it definitely has a B-movie feel to it rather than the kind of the more cinematic movie that it was made to be back in the day. It definitely has a kind of more of a made-for-TV feel to it, despite the fact that it's actually got quite a good cast here. I mean, Quaid's very charismatic. He looks very young here, obviously, and he is quite the charismatic in the lead, and you can see why he had that kind of like spate in the 80s of being the kind of leading man. So his character was great, and the kind of the dream sequences are pretty imaginative. Obviously, the standout for most people, I think, will be the kind of the Snake Man, who is this kind of this character, this young boy has kind of conjured up, and it kind of looks like a kind of Masters of the Universe bad guy, and it's a mix between kind of practical makeup and stop motion. He's kind of will pop his head up again later on in the movie. There are also some pretty decent sequences involving the President of the United States, and he's kind of like fears of a nuclear holocaust, basically, and he has some quite harsh dreams about what may happen, obviously, in the event of a nuclear war. And this kind of steers the story into a kind of a Cold War kind of storyline, which tends to actually be the main plot of this film. So despite the fact that it has this kind of sci-fi trappings, the actual bulk of this plot focuses on more of a kind of like government conspiracy / Cold War thing. So it has a kind of a weird sort of 70s vibe to it. And it's much more of a kind of, I guess, an espionage film rather than a kind of a science fiction film. It just has a few sequences, and the kind of the final showdown is obviously based in a kind of a dream. So overall, I kind of enjoyed this film. It definitely is a period of time that really shows. It really is a kind of hasn't dated particularly well. The effects here look like pretty cheap by today's standards, and this is what I mean. It definitely has a B-movie feel to it, and even some of the kind of the cliches that maybe I didn't notice when I first watched this film really kind of shine through. Like there's a sequence, for example, where Quaid's character's on the run, and there's a car which is trying to run him down, and whilst he's in a phone box, but he just stands there or sits there waiting for him to finish his call before he kind of makes his run and stuff like that. Just silly cliches that could have happened throughout this film. The cast is pretty good, though. You've got Kate Capshaw as the kind of the love interest. It's interesting that the only dreams the female characters seem to have are kind of more romantic dreams, whilst the men are all kind of horrific dreams. It's quite amusing, I suppose. Overall, it's definitely a product of its time. It was fun to revisit, but I don't think it's the classic that I remembered it to be when I kind of first saw it. It really has dated quite badly. But if you are wanting a throwback to the kind of the early to mid 80s, this definitely may be one to watch. And it's fun looking at all these kind of actors that are quite young in this period of time. Obviously, Max von Sydow, you may have seen him more recently in obviously the Game of Thrones. But nonetheless, I'll give this movie a 6 out of 10. It's a fun watch, but it has dated and maybe isn't the classic that people may remember it to be. Anyway, 6 out of 10. Have you seen it? What did you think of it? Leave me a comment and I look forward to seeing you next time. Bye for now.